The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. This is the long-awaited sequel to the previous game, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. And I really enjoyed that game. And looking at the trailers for this thing, I just assumed to be more of the same. And technically, it is. It takes almost everything in the first game that was good and improved upon it. Now, was it perfect? No. It had some very minor problems. And I'm not talking about the performance issues, as it was never an issue for me. It's some of the gameplay itself that I had some minor issues with. And I'm talking about very minor. But we'll get to that. Now, I'm going to get into what you might call spoilers. There's no story spoilers other than the beginning quests at the most. It's been out for more than 2 weeks now, so I don't think it's too much of a big deal that I talk about areas that you explore. Now, I'm only about 40 hours into this game right now, and I've finished 2 dungeons. So, I guess this is a snap judgment review, but is 40 hours playing a game really a snap judgment? Both of my kids have beaten this game and they loved it. I just don't have time to play this as much as them. I play for about 2 to 6 hours a day, depending if I have the day off or not. Now, as much as I'm about to rail on this, I really did love this game. So please take this in the lighthearted tone I'm making it in, because I'm sure this is going to be my #1 game of the year, unless Fantasy Life I somehow pulls off a miracle. The story starts off with Link and Zelda exploring some caves under Hyrule Castle, with Link looking very bored and Zelda finding every rock interesting. They find a room with a bunch of pictures in it, and Zelda instantly figures out what it means. I know this is a trope of being able to see a picture and knowing what its story is, but what if she's totally wrong? And it's just a very elaborate cooking recipe. I'm sure Link would love that, but no, she deciphers it correctly. They keep exploring the cave and find a mummified body with a glowing hand above it, and it falls off and a stone falls at her feet, and of course she picks it up instead of running away like everyone else would. The evil is released and Link tries to defend her with the Master Sword and loses an arm in the process. Zelda falls in a hole and Link awakens on a floating island with a new arm. The same arm which was holding the mummified body down. I guess it was just lucky it was the same side of arm. Or Link might have 2 right arms now. He has to get some new powers and leave the floating island to go rescue Zelda. The starting area took me about 4 hours to get out of, and it was a bit my fault. As I got lost, I wasn't sure where I was supposed to start actually playing the game. I missed the robot that I was supposed to talk to. I just ran around the starting area thinking that there was something there. That was about 15 to 20 minutes of my time, which is really sad, I know. At a certain point, I actually paid attention and I noticed there was actually a path and I followed it to where they wanted me to go. Now you have to visit 4 new shrines, which will give you 4 powers: Ultra Hand, Fuse, Recall, and Ascend. Ultra Hand gives you the ability to stick certain things together to make things. Simply put, it's crafting. Because apparently everything has to have crafting now. It did give the shrine puzzles a fun twist to them, as they would constantly give you new parts to use, and you have to figure out how they work. Now, Fuse lets you stick an object to your weapon, or your shield to get a stat bonus. Recall gives you the power to rewind an object's movement, as long as it's fairly recent. And Ascend, which is the most random of these powers, it lets you go through things above you. Now, I hardly ever use it, but I do appreciate it. Overall, the new starting area was a little large, and while the puzzles in it were fairly easy, it was still challenging in its own right. Like when I had to make a boat, and I put 3 logs together and then grabbed a sail, which was for some reason just laying around. I put it on my boat and it floated away. I'm like, no, come back here! I need to be on that! I didn't expect it to float away so fast, so I tried it again, and it floated away again! And I actually ran out of materials to finish this quest, so I actually had to reload my save. Nintendo never thought to respawn new materials in case you ran into someone like me who kept doing the same dumb thing over and over again. Eventually I just sat on the boat when I put the sail on, and it worked. I went with it this time, but I'm sure I missed an obvious solution which was much easier. Anyway, I made my way through the starting area, dying quite often, since I really suck at these new Zelda games. They've really turned up the difficulty on this one, as the last game was hard, but this one is much harder in my opinion. The main reason was the new enemies, which I wasn't quite sure how to defeat yet, because these weren't just the same 4 enemies skinned constantly, like the previous game. This one had quite a few new creatures to kill. After I finally finished the tutorial area, I jumped off the island and I forgot I actually didn't have a paraglider, so I crashed into the water below. Except I didn't die when I fell 2,000 feet into a shallow pool of water. I love that this game encompasses all kinds of physics into the builds you do and its contraptions, but jumping headfirst thousands of feet into the air into a pond of water, oh yeah, that's totally fine. It's like Nintendo's tried to have it both ways. Of course, the very first quest quest they would give you when you finally get back to Hyrule was to go back to the Great Plateau and get your powers back from the first game. Except that doesn't happen. It doesn't even reference why you can't get your powers back. Maybe the reason that you can't get your powers back is because the Sheikah Slate is missing? But you would think my new armor would work around that and plug itself into the old shrines and repower itself back up. And that comes up with the other problem. The shrines are gone. Why? Maybe I missed it. I believe that someone said they were using the old technology to rebuild their world, but the shrines just can't be used up. And also, I don't believe they can actually go inside them. In addition to the new floating areas, there's also a huge new addition to the world, which lets you explore the underworld of Hyrule. It's as large as the above ground world. It's dark and scary. Since it's all underground, you're constantly going to have to make a light source for you to see. Luckily, once you plant a light source, it never goes away. So you don't have to worry about time limits. There's also plants you can attune with in order to light up the area to fill out your underground map. The sense of exploration was different when you were down here. It wasn't about what you could see to get your interest, but what you couldn't see in the darkness, and making you wonder what was out there. And it was an interesting twist. But most of this game is going to be taking place in the ground level. You're constantly going to be sidetracked by finding new shrines, side quests, new enemies to fight, or activating the new towers to fill out your map. Now let's talk about the towers, as I really like the new way they set them up. Instead of climbing up to the top and looking around, they have you being shot up into the sky and scanning the surrounding land to fill out your map, which actually makes sense. However, it makes me wonder why they built them to do this. Did they really build towers for one person to go up and do this? Or do they all use these towers? It would be fun if I saw the villagers using this thing like a carnival ride. But truthfully, this seems pretty dangerous. You better hope a kid doesn't wander in, because it seems like the towers just work after Link activates it. I did like how a good deal of the towers have mini puzzles in them, and it's not usually as simple as just climbing to the top like the previous game. As you travel through the land, you can walk, fly with your paraglider, create vehicles, or use horses. Creating vehicles always took too long, and it was very laborious, especially with the twitchy controls. I really didn't like the way they had you rotate the objects that you use with the Ultra Hand. It would often get into some weird positions, and getting into the right one was very frustrating. Using Ultra Hand was still enjoyable. It was just one of my biggest complaints. Why is fishing still done by walking into fish? The Zelda franchise has had fishing minigames in a few of these titles. Why is it that this version of Link can make complex vehicles, but using a fishing rod is beyond him? Why not just let one of his powers be the power of the fishing rod? Or how about this? How about letting him craft one? The idea that they made Link go noodling for fish is nuts. There are two hidden abilities. One is an auto build, which I found 30 hours in by accident. Now, to be fair, there is a quest line if you go back to your main hub and look around, but I would guess a great deal of people never got it, or heard it existed from other people. This lets you quickly rebuild something you've already built before, or you might be able to find a blueprint in order to create things. This was great, and once I got it, I finally used the vehicles more, as I wouldn't have to spend 5 minutes to build a vehicle. The other one is the camera, which seems like a crazy thing to lock away. Now you might be wondering, why did they lock this away? Well, for one reason alone. They want to give you a reason to go into the depths. I didn't even know there was a camera until about 15 hours in, and I got to the map, and one of the characters said, "Wouldn't it be great to have a picture of this?" And I took a screenshot with the Switch. But apparently they wanted me to use the in-game camera. How was I supposed to know this? It was also locked away with a random character with a quest line in your starting town. I just didn't hang out in my starting town very often. Speaking of confusing quest lines, getting upgrades for your batteries was needlessly convoluted. It has 4 different kinds of batteries you have to look at. 2 of them were temporary and 2 of them were permanent. And you're supposed to use 2 of them in order to upgrade your battery. But you can't upgrade your battery where you get those parts. You have to go to another place to get those upgraded. And this place I actually forgot even existed because I hadn't been there in hours. I got so lost trying to do this, my son had to walk me through it. I died a lot playing this. Anytime a shrine had me lose all my equipment and I had to fight with no help, I just left. I don't like fighting. I prefer the exploration and puzzle solving parts. Fighting has always been a part of Zelda games, but it's always been the thing I liked the least. Now, I will say I liked how Nintendo had a variety of enemies this time around, and having real unique bosses in the dungeons was very refreshing. If you don't remember, the last game just kind of reused the same boss with a different gimmick each time. I love the changes to the world, and I also like the way the story was structured, so you have to explore glyphs on the ground in order to find parts of the story. I think it's a better way to do it than the previous find a location. One of the things I found odd was some of the environmental restrictions. In order to get to one of the temples, you're going to need 2 pieces of clothes to keep you warm, or you could constantly eat stat boosts. However, in the fire temple, you only need 1 piece of heat resistance. And you're at the bottom of the volcano. It doesn't feel consistent. One of my favorite new additions to the game is the caves. I loved exploring them all. I don't know why. It just felt exciting because I never knew what you could find. Maybe you're going to find a monster, or a bunch of gems, or even some new clothing. And the ascend power was definitely helpful here. There were a lot of side quests, as well as some small adventures to find. I think the side quests were about double the previous games, at least before the DLC added more. The quests this time around felt more fleshed out and were more enjoyable. With the world being broken down into sky, ground, and underground, it makes me wonder what Nintendo's going to do next time to make it different. I'm sure the world is going to be completely different next time, as I don't think they're going to get away with using the same world again. Although, this game proves that they can. What could possibly be next? Moving between 2 time periods? Or even Zelda games? What if he has to go back to the first game and have to help that Link? Maybe he can go to the Wind Waker world, and he can travel under the water. Actually, that's not a bad idea. Feel free to use that one, Nintendo. The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom was fantastic. As much as I love to complain about stuff, the very few minor issues I had were overwhelmed by the amount of enjoyment I got from exploring this wonderful world. Obviously, I think you should buy this, and that should not be surprising at all. The sense of adventure this game will give you will make you want to explore the entire map, because you're never going to know what you're going to find next. So you should definitely buy it now.